Go ahead and call our Wednesday, January 8, 2025 Roanoke County School Board reorganization meeting work session to order. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Item 2.01, election of chair and vice chair. Superintendent Dr. Nicely.
All right, so this time nominations are now open for school board chair.
All right, Mr. Chair, I would like to nominate Mrs. Shelley Clemens for chair.
I'll second that.
Madam Clerk?
Well, I have to ask if there are any more nominations
Yes.
first.
Yeah.
Okay. And actually, no seconds required for that, so you're good. And so if no other nominations, you can call the roll.
Mr. Greenway?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Bajani?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. London?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Clemens?
I abstain.
All right, and then I'll go and do this next part, which is approval of clerk and deputy clerk. So I would like to.
Chair.
Actually, get to the vice chair
You
first.
do vice
Yeah,
chair.
you need to do
Oh, sorry,
vice
my
chair.
bad. I did not have that on the script. Okay, we'll open up the floor for nominations for vice chair.
I'd like to nominate Mr. Hudson as vice chair.
Second.
There's no second.
No, we don't
Any
need
other
it.
nominations? If not, call the roll.
Mr. Greenway?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Bajani?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. London?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hudson?
Abstain.
Ms. Clemens?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and my fault. I think at this point, the new chair takes over, and then I'll make a recommendation for the clerk and deputy clerk.
That's cool.
Go.
That's cool. He's great.
All right, item 2.02, approval of clerk and deputy clerk.
Okay, so I recommend that Ms. Edie York be appointed clerk of the school board, and that Dr. Jamie Soltis be appointed as deputy clerk of the school board. So you will need a motion and a second for that. to accept my recommendation.
Motion moved.
Second?
Madam Clerk?
Mr. Greenway?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Bajani?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. London?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Clemens?
Yes, ma'am. Item 2.03, establishment of meeting dates, places, and times. Dates and times for scheduled school board meetings and work sessions are listed in board docs for adoption by the board. Is there a motion to adopt the dates and items as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Madam Clerk?
Mr. Greenway?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Bajani?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. London?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Clemens?
Yes, ma'am. Item 2.04, appointments to committees. School Board Policy 2.08 lists various committees to which the board appoints individual members. The Special Ed Advisory Committee is a committee appointed by the school board and reports to the board. The Roanoke Valley Governor's School Board is an independent board that provides oversight for the Roanoke Valley Governor's School. The Audit Committee, CTE, General Advisory Committee, and School Health Advisory Board are superintendent committees that make recommendations to the superintendent and his staff. I nominate the following board members to serve on these various advisory committees and boards. Audit Committee, Mr. Greenway and Mr. Linden. Special Education Advisory Committee, Mr. Hudson. CTE General Advisory Committee, Ms. Vashani, Mr. Greenway, Ms. Clemens, alternating with 2 members at each meeting. School Health Advisory Board, Ms. Vashani. Roanoke Valley Governor's School Board, Ms. Clemens. Is there a motion to appoint these representatives as nominated?
So moved.
Second.
Madam Clerk?
Mr. Greenway?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Bajani?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. London?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Clemens?
Yes, ma'am. All right, 3.01, closed session in accordance with Code of Virginia, Section 2.2-3711A. Ms. Vashani, will you read us into closed?
Absolutely. I move that the Roanoke County School Board convene in closed session for the following: for consultation with legal counsel and briefings by staff members pertaining to actual or probable litigation and consultation with legal counsel regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel pursuant to 2.2-3711A7 of the Code of Virginia.
I'll second.
Madam Clerk?
Mr. Greenway?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Bajani?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. London?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Clemens?
Yes, ma'am. Okay, all right, welcome back. So we are at agenda item 3.02, certification of closed session in accordance with Code of Virginia, Section 2.2-3711A. Mr. Linden, will you read us out of closed?
Yes, Madam Chair. I move that the Roanoke County School Board come out of closed session for the following: for consultation with legal counsel and briefings by staff members pertaining to actual or probable litigation, and consultation with legal counsel regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel pursuant to 2.2-3711A7 of the Code of Virginia. And I also move to certify that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under this chapter, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened, were heard, discussed, or considered in the meeting by the school board.
Second.
Madam Clerk?
Mr. Greenway,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Buchani,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Linden,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hudson.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Clemens,
Yes, ma'am. Item 3.03, action from closed session. There is no action. So we'll move on to 4.01, major construction project updates. Mr. Todd Kagels, Mr. Wes Mitchell, and Mr. Kamal Khalil. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Happy New Year to everybody.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. We have with us today, as usual, Wes Mitchell, the project manager at RCCTC from Skanska, and Kamal Khalil, the project manager for W.E. Cundiff and Glen Cove, and Jason Pax here, regional director with Skanska, just in case we need him for anything. They're just going to share some photographs and some updates on where we are with the construction.
Well, thank y'all for having me back. I hope everybody had some good holidays. We worked through most of it, and we'll give you some updates. Starting off on CTE, still a lot of the same activities. Obviously, a lot of site work to get done, so that's what we're still working on, mass grading. So cutting the site down to grade, grubbing, so getting rid of trees and shrubbery, and then backfilling, bringing all our slopes up to grade where we need to be. Backfill operations have been focused on the lower slope to the east of Area C, that's on the far east side, above the retention pond that you'll see when you drive by on Peters Creek. There's about 20 feet of fill in some areas there that have to come up, so 8 inches at a time. It's slow moving, but it's coming along. Some of that's been held up by a wet month, but during that time they've been able to focus on other things like the heavy rock operations that are continuing that can be done in just about any weather, and that's what they've done. They were trying to crush all the rock and put it right back into the building pad. That was kind of slow going. So what we've transitioned to now with 2 rock crushers is using one of those rock crushers to put it right back in place, and then the others we're moving rock, stockpiling it so we can come back and hit it later. That's made the process much faster, clearing it so we can get the building pad ready to at least start our footings and stuff, which is starting this week. I'm supposed to start on Monday. That got pushed back because of the weather, obviously. But so they'll start. You'll see pictures too of the building pad, and area D is ready. So that's the south side of the building. We'll chase that around north to east as the building pad gets prepped. So all of D's ready. Probably half of A. So by the time they get there and get their footings dug, hopefully we can catch up and stay on schedule. Other activities, this month the construction trailer mobilization was completed. It's been a big help as far as having our meetings and coordinations become a lot easier because we're all there on site. Project buyout is also progressing well and on budget. We're going to get in a good spot according to Branch so far there. And then, like I said, footings were scheduled to start on Monday. We did get rebar delivered for that today for all our footings, concrete for the job. We'll move on, just show you some pictures. I don't think I mentioned the blasting. We did have several blasts this month, 4 in December. We had 1 in January, and we have 1 on Friday as well. We were expecting the 1 on Friday to be the last, but they may split it into 2 depending on the results. So we're right about done with all the blasting. And these are just some pictures. You can see all the holes that they're drilling. They'll fill all of those up with explosives, and then the picture on your right is your end result. There's a lot of upheaval in the ground. It allows the site contractor to come in and remove all that stuff, whereas before it's way too hard. This is the building pad work that talked about. So taking rock from the pad, putting it in the crusher, and putting it right back into the pad as fill. And then they'll roll over that with a sheep's foot roller and a smooth drum to get it nice and compact. They've really put a lot of effort into putting manpower on the pad, so you can see how congested it is there, getting it all ready. So what you're looking at there is the far south of the building, where the building's going to sit. It's up to grade. This is performing a proof roll of the pad by our geotechnical engineer. They'll come out, they're out there every day observing, and then they'll use these big 8-ton trucks loaded down and watch for any rutting or pumping of the ground. This thing's really solid. It doesn't move at all, so there's been good results there. And this is some of our fill on the lower slope that we're talking about. It's been slow going because of the weather, but this area has to come up quite a bit. And actually there in the corner, some of your building's actually going to sit on that, so it's got to come up all the way to the building pad. This is just some of the stockpiling. If you drive by and just see mounds of rock everywhere, that's what that is. They're moving it. They'll crush it in place. Those areas will need fill too, so hopefully we can just put it right back where it needs to be, and that has really sped up the operation. And then just the progress picture looking from Peters Creek, looking up, you can see how much of the earth has been cut into. And then that little L there on the left, right there in the corner, that's about the elevation of the building. Any questions on that one? That's all I have.
The fence that's in the retention pond, is that going to be removed, or does that stay?
Yes, that's baffling they put it in for a real heavy rain event. It just slows the water down as it flows, so the sediment can settle and it doesn't get into your.
So that is permanent.
If it becomes a problem, they can pump it out, so.
Yeah, no, those won't stay.
Oh, okay.
It's because there's a lot of clay and stuff, or we haven't had all our grass seed put down, so all that's still going into the retention pond, and that baffling helps slow down the water flow, so the sediment gets to the pond and not into your water system. That's what that's for.
Part of your erosion and sediment control measures.
Yeah.
Okay.
Come on. I can click through if you keep reaching.
Go ahead. You can just go back. As far as the school's going, they're going head to head. We used to have Glen Cove ahead of Condiv, but now they're about the same, running the same time and the same full blast. So we're doing good on both of them. Let me talk about outside work. Outside work is like major excavation, structural like a piping underground and inlets, and a corrugated pipe, which is also like for drainage systems. What's lucky on the schools is we can go inside and work on a rainy day. We could, outside work would be let go, and then we can go inside and work on maybe duct work, maybe electrical work, copper piping, you name it, and we can work inside and avoid the weather. Mainly, like the major works that's going on at the schools now is the installation of HVAC system, and now we're like doing drywall and insulation, and some of the bathrooms, like on the inside, we're doing masonry block installation, and on the outside we have that green, like insulation from the weather too. On the inside also, we're doing trenches for the sewer lines installation for the underslabs. If you can go to the next picture. Like this is where like inlets and structural for the outside, and the piping on the left-hand side, like the corroded, the piping for the drainage system. And that's like the studs for the wall separation, insulation. And I kind of put that picture just for that purpose, because they're doing duct work, copper piping, sprinkler work. electrical work, piping, wiring, boxes, flex conduit, you name it. Like even the drywall that shows it in the back, I put that on purpose. So mainly like we're doing, like this is the one on the left-hand side, it's for sewer. They just poured that. I mean, we finished that last week and we poured it last week also before the rain. And even this one shows like the duct work being finished around it and the drywall. So we're doing really good, to be honest with you. I mean, we're doing like excellent. Is that it?
That's it.
Any questions?
Even with the holidays, there's been significant progress over the last 4 weeks. If you ever want to go out and take a tour, go inside and see exactly what they've done, or just go on the sites and see what it looks like outside now, if you contact me, we'll set that up and coordinate it with Skanska and Branch and be happy to take you on a tour and show you around.
It's more exciting to go on Wes's job because of the blasting. But the schools is like you got stuff that you can do at home, but the blasting, to me, the blasting is awesome.
Yeah.
A few folks have reached out and wanted to do that, so I'll send something out and we can get something scheduled.
I don't know, sewer pipes, blasting.
Exactly.
All right. Todd, do you mind just reminding, I know the board knows, just for the good of everybody, what Wes and Kamal and Jason's role is with all this, just as a reminder.
They're our consultants, and they are doing quality control and project management. So they are managing our budget. They're conducting the owner direct purchase program, which is we're actually saving. We've not done this on major construction projects before, but we're hoping to save around $1 million by buying all the equipment ourselves through the school system and not paying tax on it. For instance, in our last construction project at Byrd, the contractor bought all the materials. They had to pay tax, which meant we paid the tax. Skanska was actually, they brought that idea to us, and they're coordinating that program, and it is projected to save about $1 million over the course of the thing. So definitely worth it to have these guys on board, and quality control is a big part of what they're doing to make sure everything's being done correctly. And of course, we have project managers from Roanoke County Schools on site also, so that we know exactly what's going on all the time, and those guys coordinate directly with the school to make sure that the school administration can focus on educating kids, and we focus on doing the construction piece.
Just to add, let's say as an example, they're pouring concrete. We're right there, watching the testing, getting the report, making sure that it's done properly. As an
Oversight is
example.
always good.
As an example.
Have we done similar at previous projects, or is this something?
I don't know the answer to that. That was prior to my tenure.
I think this is new.
I think it's-
We've not hired a third party
Consultation.
representative, in which just with projects of this scope, we felt like that was in our best interest to do so. I think it's been a big help.
And the manpower of doing 3 at one time.
I was gonna
If
say
we were
3 at
doing
one time
one,
is-
at a time.
We've done some value engineering, but we've not done this.
Yeah.
And we've done a lot for school districts all around this area as well too. So it's pretty common.
They also represent us if there's any disputes with the contractors. We've already run into one with the subcontractor, and they represent our interest in that.
That's good.
And help
Very
write
good.
contracts.
Yes, sir.
Well, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Todd, before you leave, I do have one thing. Guys, I'd like to see if we can pull one piece out of our minor capital, and it was that $40,000 piece for the libraries, to give them the $2,500 a piece to do with what they wanted to in the elementary libraries. I don't think we're moving forward with that, right? We're kind of holding off right now.
That was on a list of unfunded
Right.
projects.
I'd like to see if we could pull that out. If everyone agrees, and if they don't, then we can take a vote or talk about it. But it's 40,000. It's 2,500 to each elementary library in the county to upgrade or to get a piece of equipment that they think they need in each library. I don't know. Does anybody feel strongly one way or the other?
I don't know, what are you suggesting to pull that out?
Yeah,
of
to go
what?
ahead and allow Todd to move forward with that.
We discuss it more, I don't know, is this the forum for that?
Yeah, we can do it at the next meeting. It's
Yeah.
fine. we can talk about it in there.
Yeah, the proposal was made to
And it
us
is the form for
about
that.
2,500
It
to
is
each
the-
elementary school library, and to leave that to the discretion of the librarian.
Librarian, correct. Yeah,
I don't remember.
and they all benefit. It's not one, it's all.
Sir,
You
Yeah,
guys are good. I don't think this pertains to them.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
yeah,
That's what I meant by that.
yeah. Well, Todd is, Todd, kind of works with us.
We'll need just a second to switch over.
No, we did say yes. Yeah. You know, that's, everything's kind of, that's why I suggested the major capital and the employee savings to take care of that and move on. But we can't seem to move on. Seems like we're dragging it out.
Item 4.02, cell tower leasing discussion, Mr. Todd Kagels, Mr. Nathan Holland, and Ms. Lori Schweller.
Yes, ma'am. Just a quick recap. Back at the end of October, we were approached by Nathan Holland, who's the Senior Site Development Manager for GDN Sites, with a proposal to lease space for a cell tower on school property. If you will recall, at the last work session, we discussed that briefly with the board and asked if you'd be interested in hearing the rest of the proposal. And you indicated that you were. So we have Nathan Holland, as you said, and Lori Schweller, who is an attorney with Williams Mullen Law Firm, representing GDN Sites. They're going to do their presentation, and then what we're looking for at the end of their presentation is a consensus on whether or not to move forward with them going to their design phase. So it wouldn't be a final approval of the project, but it would be to say, yes, we have significant interest in doing this, and please go ahead. Obviously, they have to invest resources to do that work, so we don't want them to do that if we're, absolutely not interested in it after we hear what they have to say today.
Good afternoon, Board. Thank you for having us. I'm Lori Schweller. I'm an attorney with Williams Mullen. I represent Verizon Wireless, and Nate Holland here, who's working on this project. He's an employee of GDN Sites, which is managing the project for Verizon Wireless. So as Mr. Kagels explained, we'd like to present to you just some basic information about the proposal so you can make a decision about whether you want to move forward with the leasing and have us move forward with the special use permit process with Roanoke County. And I'm obviously here to answer all of your questions about the proposal. So this slide is intended to give you an outline of the project. The area where the wireless facility would be leased from you under lease, and the typical size of that lease area is 75 by 75 feet, just a square. That can be adjusted depending on the location and what's in the surroundings. These leases typically are for 5 years with 4 5-year renewals that renew automatically.
It says 25 years.
Yes, total of 25 years.
So 5.
Yes, that's correct. The structure in the center of the compound is a monopole style wireless facility. So it looks like a pole. It looks like a light pole with antennas on it. Not a lattice tower, no guy wires. It's just a pole. This would be the compound would be fenced, so no one would be able to enter it except for authorized personnel. For safety reasons, of course. And it doesn't require any utilities other than electricity and fiber optic, which Verizon would install. And then it doesn't draw on county resources in any way. There's no traffic involved other than a technician visiting the site 6 to 8 times per year. So this is showing you the existing, the locations of existing Verizon wireless facilities. So these are existing cell towers, wireless facilities from which Verizon provides service, and you can see those are marked by 3 red stars. You can see how this proposed new site kind of creates a quadrilateral shape there. This is an area where service is very much needed. This is the parcel you're familiar with, a tax map parcel, the Cave Springs Middle School
And then the elementary school.
and elementary school.
Yep.
So this is your Roanoke County zoning map for this parcel, and it is zone C1, which is a commercial zoning. C1 does allow wireless facilities like this with the approval of a special use permit. So we would, of course, if you wanted to move forward with this, we would take this project through the Roanoke County special use permit process. We would make the application, we would go before the planning commission, we'd have a community meeting, go before the planning commission, request planning commission recommendation for approval, and ultimately it would require approval of the Board of Supervisors, the special use permit. You can see that all around this parcel is residentially zoned property. Wireless facilities are not permitted at all in residential zones. You can see it's a great location to provide service to the schools, to the surrounding residential neighborhoods and environs on a parcel where the county benefits from the rent. So we have two proposed locations on this parcel, marked here, A and B. So the one at the top, B, that's near the police station. And the one at the bottom would be a light pole replacement at the ball field. So one of the monopoles there that's currently holding lights would become a wireless facility, essentially. It would look the same, except it would have antennas attached to it. And that's a close-up of that location. I was just describing option A.
So there are several light poles that surround the field. This location was chosen because it's closest to the road, easy access in and out, for a technician if they needed to go fix do whatever maintenance they need to do at the site. And so this is also probably ease of construction as well, too, less disturbance. So that's why that one was chosen in that location. Now, there are other poles out there, and we could have a discussion about utilizing and replacing one of those other poles.
Option A clearly couldn't have a 75 by 75 area
No,
with a fence around
like-
it. How do you?
So that would have to be, that lease area size would have to shrink. Typically, if we were to utilize and replace one of the light poles, the equipment would be placed off to the side, possibly over here in the field. There's radio equipment cabinets. And then there would be conduits that would run underground to the pole, and the antennas would be placed on the pole. So the 75 by 75 foot is the typical lease area size that they normally would, but we can shrink that down and do something different that would accommodate our equipment and work with you all on that.
So in that scenario, I'm assuming there would not be any fencing around the pole itself.
Typically, no, there's not, unless of course you would want it. But you have a walkway here that would run. So what we could do is run conduits underground to the pole, and then up the pole with our coax equipment that attach to the antennas that are on the pole.
Would there be fencing around the other
Yeah,
equipment?
yeah, we could fence our equipment. And then this is just a elevation view, just showing which pole in the distance that we would like to utilize.
So would it actually be higher than the existing light pole?
Yes. Yep. So they would replace the pole, put the lights back on at the same height, and then the pole would just extend above those lights, and their equipment would go up on top.
Do you have a look of one of those poles that you're talking about with the lights?
We do, and we'll be getting to that. Yep. And then this is option B, which would be next to the police station that's out on the property. This would be where we'd want a 75 by 75 foot lease area. fence compound to put up a new pole. And so this would be separate from having to replace a pole. This would just be a brand-new pole. So this would be a secondary option. And this is just a view, and you would come in through here, and you could put up a fence compound with a pole right in the middle. And then some example installations. This is a tower that is located in Chesterfield County, Virginia. This is an example of where the pole was replaced, the lights were put back on, and in this case, they just went above the lights. But this is where it's at a football field at the high school. I don't have any pictures of the ground equipment, but that's the view of what we would do in the case of replacing a pole.
And do they have that one set up the same way, where the other equipment is off to the side and not next to it? And okay.
Yeah, just depends on where the pole is. Sometimes they'll put the equipment they can put it under the stadium seating. Sometimes there's a separate area. I just don't happen to have a picture of the ground equipment in this case.
And maybe you don't know the answer to this, but
Yeah.
I don't know how tall our existing light pole is to know would it wind up looking like that, whereas just above the lights, or are our poles significantly lower, so you're going to have sort of an oddball going significantly higher.
Yeah, I don't know what the existing height of those poles are. I just know that what we would be looking at with the top height is 195 feet.
195?
195 feet. Yeah, that football field sits down below the road. The almost the top of the school building is even with the road, so they need to get up above that to allow the height to provide to the neighborhood across the road.
And did you guys put option A as that being the preferable option, or?
Either one. We just picked, those two options and, presented them to you. It wasn't in any order.
Okay.
And then this is another example. This is in Woodbridge, Virginia, where this one, of course, is a little bit taller above the lights. And it looks like in this case, the equipment's here at the base of the tower.
Do you know how tall that one is?
I do not. I would have to pull that data from where I got the picture, the person who I got the picture from. And then this would be an example of a freestanding, not replacing a light pole. This is the compound of the tower. Here's the pole and then the ground equipment. And so this is just an example model pole without any lights on it. This is what we would propose sitting next to the police station that's out there on the property.
And you don't know how tall that one is either, then?
That one is 195 feet.
Oh, did you
And I
say
think just the angle of it makes it look a little bit shorter.
Well, it's 16 stories. It's 195 feet, 16 stories.
And then this is just a photo of.
It's tall.
It's tall.
16 stories is tall.
This is just a photo of the standard Verizon ground equipment that we typically install. You can see in this case there's a wood fence. We could install a wood fence around the equipment. There's just some equipment cabinets and some various radio equipment. And then there's, you kind of see the coax equipment that runs from the equipment that runs up the tower to the antennas on top.
I got a question, if you
Yep.
don't mind, and you may be getting to this later, but with all this equipment, I'm sure there's folks out there that have a fear of like radiation or some sort of like cancer-causing issues from all this power equipment and antennas and radio equipment. I mean, is there any studies or anything that you can cite that deny that fact?
These wireless facilities, and that goes for cell towers, antennas attached to buildings, small cells attached to utility poles, all of these facilities are regulated by the Federal Communications Commission. And the FCC has adopted standards for maximum radiation. That began back in the 90s, and those standards were adopted based on expert studies, peer-reviewed studies done around the world. And so those standards have been in place for many decades now and were reconfirmed around 2019 when 5G came about, because people were wondering, well, you know, we've got shorter wavelengths, does that make a difference? Can you relook at this? And so those have been reconfirmed for all the technologies out there now. And what we hear from the FCC and from the FDA and from NIH and all of the federal agencies that look at this is that we don't have any evidence that these types of facilities have caused any harm to humans. In fact, these facilities, that the maximum radiation that they put out is thousands of times lower than what is actually permitted by regulation. And I should point out that it's non-ionizing radiation, so it doesn't affect the DNA of the cells the way X-rays, CAT scans, gamma rays, PET scans, all those things would do. It doesn't, this type of radiation doesn't have that same effect. So it's kind of like the radiation that we're all exposed to right now, coming from cell towers, radio towers, television, you know, microwaves, all those things. It's not thought to cause any harmful health effects.
With those waves, I mean, is there a designated area, I guess a distance that you're safer than others? I mean, you know, being right up on it versus, you know, 100 yards, 500 yards away from this. I mean,
yeah,
obviously it's going to reduce your exposure,
right,
the further the distance.
Right, and having it 195 feet in the air, you know, your very large antenna that high, the radiation degrades tremendously as it comes down to ground level. So there's no effect on people who are at ground level. The only place where you have to put in any sort of safety precautions is for workers, OSHA standards, and you're standing immediately in front of an antenna working on it, then you would, not because of ionizing, but because of heating. And so there's no concern. You could be standing right underneath it. There's no concern for anyone on the ground. And so to answer your question, the FCC does not recommend a specific distance from these facilities for safety. They don't.
You mean the distance from the building?
That's right. The FCC doesn't do that. So you could have these anywhere in relationship to the school building.
I just have one question, I'm sorry.
Sure.
But the standard height, when I Googled it, for the lights at a high school, which I'm assuming ours would be in this range, is 40 feet to 70 feet. And you're going 195 feet.
That's a standard height for a Verizon wireless monopole is 195
Right.
feet, right?
Yeah.
Those poles didn't look like you were much higher than the original.
You're talking
pole.
about the example ones?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I can't see it in comparison to the other light poles. In the other picture you showed, I mean, it's all about perception and the depth and the angle you're
Right.
taking the pictures. So I'm just
Right.
wondering, are we gonna have lights and then another twice as tall pole?
I think what you're saying, I mean, obviously, just from perspective, I think it would be much better option would be B than A all day long if we were to decide to do it.
But then you're next to Ranch Crest, which is next to developments and different things, then that becomes
Planning
problematic.
commission
Yeah,
is gonna hear a
it's-
lot of
yeah.
complaints.
Yeah, it's, so.
I mean, you
it's-
already have those poles there, so you already have that visual element.
You talking about at the track?
Yeah, at the track. And so you already have that visual element, so people are already looking at the poles. In my experience, just you kind of already have that clutter. So if it's a little bit higher, even if it's double the height, you know, you already have that clutter there that people are looking at.
Could you go back
But
to the
option
image where
B-
you show the field and where the
Oh, sure, yeah.
the ground equipment would be? Because I feel like that's another issue. I mean, there's not a lot of space there.
This
Yeah.
photo right here. Yeah, there's. I mean, if we were to just lease. Oh, which one? Option B or option A?
No, the other one, by the field.
Oh, by the field. Okay. We have the ability, we could probably, if we're just putting in our equipment, probably limit it to like a 12-foot by 30-foot lease area for just our equipment. We could make it a little bit bigger if another carrier wanted to use the pole. You could lease out the space to another carrier to put up equipment on it as well too. So, we could possibly do a 30 by 30, 35 by 35 foot square where both another carrier could also place their equipment. So there's different options that we could utilize in this area. We could put it up against the fence. Not sure what you all use this area for over here. I don't know how much that gets used for storage. I'm not sure what that space is used for, but we could work with staff to find a solution that would work for both of us.
The ground elevation in option B is clearly gonna be higher than that, because as you mentioned, option A is kinda down in a bowl. Would that still need to be 195 feet at option B? Because a 195-foot pole on option A is probably gonna be 40 feet lower than, could you get away with a 155-foot pole on option B?
I would have to speak with my engineer who designs the radio engineer who designs these locations for Verizon. What he told me was 195 feet, but I would have to go back to him and see if he could live with something a little bit shorter in that location. So I could work with him, see if he could reduce that, see how much he could reduce it.
Well, and option B keeps it further away from the kids, correct?
I'm probably going to be the contrarian here. So I'm just going to say that there are studies out there, out of Australia specifically, that the radiation is 300 times higher. So I think that, we can continue to talk about option A and B and everything else. I think we should all probably do our homework and research and not just take on face value what the FCC, the NIH, and the FDA says. You could just do a ChatGPT search. Studies have indicated that proximity to cell towers can elevate RF radiation levels. For instance, research in a kindergarten 300 meters away, 3.5 times higher than those in locations 300 meters away. So I think there's a large health concern. Headaches, memory problems, sleep disturbances, increased cancer risk. There was an Egyptian study that was put up by the American Academy of Pediatrics. So there's a lot of concern that I have in terms of health reasons. I just don't think it's worth the risk to our students. So I'm not going to argue with you and your stance on anything. I'm just going to say right here for the record that it's not something that I'm going to support.
I think that was the problem before. I mean, this was addressed several years ago. So is there no other location, because obviously nothing's been done in the number of years since this was last addressed, is there no other location where it can go that's not on our property?
I've done the initial search of trying to find a location. We've looked in different spots and different other commercial properties. As we showed by the zoning map, there's a large area of residential around here, and so I've not been able to find any other properties that would work for my engineer. Also meet the required setbacks that are required by the county code to where we can put these towers, and also locations that meets my engineer's approval. What he needs in this area is additional capacity. That's what he's seeing a lot of, is a lot of usage. So there are a lot of homes. You have the high school as well, and so they're just in this little pocket of area. There's just a lot of use, and so I have unfortunately offered him other locations, and it doesn't work for him. And so this is why we're back here, today, seeing if this is something that we can.
Why doesn't it work for him? Because people don't want it?
No. So what he does is he has a modeling program with his coverage. And so if I give him a location, he'll put it into his modeling program, and he can tell that location isn't going to work for him.
Yeah, Nate's describing the Verizon radio frequency engineer's work, so he's not concerned about about the part that we do, the special use permit and leasing.
Yeah, again, I'm just concerned about putting our students and our staff at risk for unnecessarily for, quantified higher levels of radiation to our students. I'm just not willing to take on that risk personally as a school board member serving on that school board right now. I don't know where anybody else stands.
A couple questions on the lease. Is there a standard lease amount? Is that negotiable if you add additional cell towers from other companies on that pole? Is there a step increase every time it renews? And would there be any reason that, would it be a guaranteed 25-year lease, or could it be canceled shorter?
There's lots of different things we could do with the lease. The rent would increase every year. It would compound upon itself every year. I think you had mentioned, like, if another carrier were to join it, that's usually typically called revenue sharing. That'd be something that we could discuss, putting that in the lease. The length and the termination, that would also be something that we could discuss and negotiate, between you all and Verizon. So,
Those specifics would be done in closed session.
Understand.
All those concerns aside, as far as,
Not on the backs of my students.
the options itself, I'm trying to remember on that particular part right there, that the area, are there concessions over there, or porta johns and so forth, usually for games?
Like the food trucks, maybe, is that?
That's
I
what I'm
can't
wondering.
figure out which side.
I'm trying to think
Feels
what we
backwards,
typically
but-
have over there during a game.
Yeah.
Band uses that space too.
Yeah. I'm just not sure the
Like
concerns
using the
aside,
space, right.
I'm not sure that option would even work, but.
Right.
Option A, you're talking? Yeah, it's so congested.
What happens at the end of 25 years?
typically they try to renew the lease. Now, in 25 years from now, do we know how technology is going to be?
What didn't we have 25 years ago? I'll tell you that. We didn't have cell phones.
It's not going to take me. I'll be hooked up to a machine.
We didn't even have Starlink. I
I'll be
mean, look
breathing
at
with a
that.
machine.
So I'm
So-
assuming that the 5-year renewals are your option, not ours?
They're automatic.
Just, well, there's obviously for 5 years, there's a 5-year reason.
Right.
So there's either, somebody's gotta have an option, and it doesn't sound like it would be ours, it would be yours, correct?
Yeah, typically they don't want to give. I want to say want to give. The termination is usually just on their end, just because they're putting a lot of money and time to develop these locations, and they wouldn't want you to come back year 2, year 3, and say we don't want this anymore, because they are spending a lot of upfront costs to develop these and construct these, and so there could be some language put in maybe year 15 if they can have enough time to recoup they might offer some mutual termination. Again, that would be something that would have to be negotiated with you all. And I think what happens after 25 years, usually they, like I said, would try to renegotiate, renew the terms. And if they decide, well, we don't want this site anymore, they would take it away and try to typically put it back as close as they could to how it was before.
In my mind, in 25 years, it's kind of like the solar option. In 25 years, we may be able to do this with,
Sure.
a little tower somewhere in.
Then I would be out of a job, and so that would be disappointing.
But 25 years, and the way technology goes, it's.
It's moving at a rapid pace. It's not
Right.
even 25 years. It's like every year, every 2
Right.
years. It's just
Yeah, not
Bluetooth.
only under your lease, but under the special use permit from the county. If it's not used, it would have to be dismantled and removed, and as Nate said, everything restored.
Restored.
So Todd, your question for us was whether or not we,
Yeah, they have to devote resources to doing engineering past this point. So the question is, do we have enough interest to request for them to do that? Or, and prepare lease specifics and that sort of thing? Or are we, do we have consensus that we're not interested in it and we don't obviously want to waste their time if that's the
Well, I
case?
think it's more in Shelley and Cheryl's backyard, and whatever y'all think.
well, I just know how much pushback there was before for the reasons that Cheryl was mentioning. That was the reason there was so much pushback before. I mean, I had a child at the middle school at that time, and people really were upset about it. So that would be the concern. Is it worth it to us to go down that road again? I mean, I guess you could have public discussion over it, but I mean, if you feel really strongly about,
I have the health concern, the uncertainty of that. It's not a sure thing. Nothing today is a sure thing, right? No matter what three-letter organization says, it's sure. The psychological impacts on parents and students, if there's any anxiety, could be, then there's of course property value decline, if that's even an issue. Aesthetically and environmentally, I don't think it's going to be very appealing. And if I'm just wondering if there's better alternatives, that we could be looking at in the future. And I worry about the liability risks too to our division. So we're getting sued every now and again for something. So, do I want to take on any more
do you have
risk?
thoughts?
Yeah, I think we've brought up some legitimate questions, but I wouldn't mind maybe us putting those questions together and getting them back to them before we totally shoot it down and see what we may come up with. I had some clients in last week from Virginia Beach area, and before they came, they sent me a map and said it needs to be within a 5G area. They wanted to make sure that house was within
We
that
have
5G
5G.
area. So those houses that may not be covered by that, they weren't even interested in looking. So it's
You can't build any more around where that is
No,
anyway.
but if they're not covered, then it's not going to diminish
There's
that
no
house value
problem
much.
selling houses
but
in Cave Spring area, I'll tell you that much.
I think it's worth
Right, Shelley?
further consideration, personally, if we can get some other questions answered.
Well, I'm a no, because I don't want to waste their time.
I'll echo what Mr. Greenway said. This is in both of your backyards, so I'll support whatever you two decide you want to do. I'm not going to override your community and say that I demand a cell tower to be put over there when you have to answer your constituents. And I definitely don't want to put any children at risk for health issues. If there's a question about that, then I'm a no straight out the gate. But
And here's, to me, we've been through this 3 or 4 years, 2 or 3 years, whatever it was ago.
5 years ago.
And there was a lot of outcry from the communities. We're in the business of making money. That's, have a small business, and would look at anything and everything that's possible. But for me, the community didn't want it at the time. We're a little bit more of a rural community, but nonetheless, I hear all the concerns, and I'm not a doctor. I'm not in this field, and I don't know, so I kind of listen to what has been told to us in the past, and not that many years ago, maybe even technology's advanced some further now, but for me, the risk of putting one child in danger, I don't care how much money we get out of it. If the Board of Supervisors want it and they think it's that big a deal, let them bring it forward. And
I agree with you, Tim. I think I don't want to earn a profit on the backs of our children.
no, and
Put them at
again, I
risk.
respect that it's your two areas. So if y'all want to hear more about it, and it's going over in the cave area, I'm good either way. But I can just tell you what I think and what I've heard, and whether I'm right or not. I'm not an expert. You just go off the information that you've been given, and do the best you can with what you know or hear, and
May I offer a couple additional points that could help with your decision? If you're interested in gathering more information, we could let you know some of the school boards that have, approved wireless facilities. I know there's some at a couple of high schools in Albemarle County, and, we could, you may want to talk to your peers and see what kinds of consideration and what kind of response from the parents and students they had there. I also just, anecdotally, I've been working on cell tower zoning for 15 to 20 years now, and a lot of locations, a lot of counties and cities that originally were very, very concerned about health and safety and those issues, they have learned more about it. They've gone through the experience of people needing to be able to work at home and people needing to be able to do their schoolwork at home. They've progressed through some times that have changed their perspective. And so now when you go to those localities and try to get cell towers zoned, they're open arms. And, you know, I just say that because you may find that some of the folks in these neighborhoods who were opposed 5 years ago or whenever that was, maybe now they're kind of concerned because they're trying to work from home and they can't, or their children are trying to do, you know, work on something at home and they can't. A lot of people have changed their minds over the past 5 years. So I just throw that out.
But while that's very convincing, there is Starlink, which is not an issue at all. I mean, I use it and I just don't have any issues with it. So
Okay.
I'll just put out a plug for Starlink.
Mr. Greenway, you and I were on the board the last time this came back, and I think it was about 5 years ago. And to say the community was against it, I'm not sure is accurate. I know we had less than a half dozen speakers that came out and spoke against it. I mean, I think it was 4,
Well-
maybe
Well,
5.
I was against it, tell you that much back then.
And I'm good. Look, if they want to move, I'm okay with it. If you want to move,
Well, I'm not
forward.
sure we wanna be
But
wasting
I can
time
tell you what
and
Mr. Ray told me, and if you believe Mr. Ray, that's all I can do. You spoke to him. You know what he went through. So, but I'm good. I hate to say it this way. It's not in my community. I respect.
If it was in your community, what would you say?
I would absolutely say no,
Okay.
but it's not, and so it's not. But
I
I
don't need
still
to talk to any other school board to hear what they have to say about this. For me, it's just it's a visceral reaction to putting our students at risk. And any organization could come in and I'm not saying y'all are, but any organization could come in and tell us that it's going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. And I will tell you, the radiation studies that I know that are out there are just not. It's not good, and there might not be enough lawsuits out there yet for us to even know about it. Heck, a pharmaceutical company, you know, all the time they're pulling medicines off the market.
And to Mr. Linden's point, if you know, knowing that, you know, it could be an uphill climb, and I really haven't heard from Ms. Clemens, but, you know, knowing it could be an uphill climb, if you want to put more information together and give us more, I'm okay with that. I'm not against learning or hearing what you have to say. I don't want to do it in a manner that says, well, you could be wasting your time. You know what I mean? So I don't want to do it in that regard. I want to respect your time and Verizon's money to do that. But if, you know, you want to give us some more information, if that helps David and Shelley, if you want to hear more information, it's whatever y'all say. But
Thank you. We appreciate those comments. We're just here to provide whatever would help you with your decision. We're happy to help.
Clearly, I don't think we're going to get that today.
Yeah, I don't feel strongly about moving forward at this point, so.
Okay. Well, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time too. I
Thank
know
you.
it
Thank
takes
you.
time to do this.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I want the gold button. Is this you? Item 4.03, new policy, athletic directors and coaching assignments, Dr. Jamie Soltis.
Thank y'all.
Yeah, so staff was asked to investigate a policy that would look at whether athletic directors should be coaches because of the level of separation that doesn't exist when they do. So we put a draft policy together. Basically says that the board recognizes the need to maintain high standards of leadership oversight and operational management for athletic programs to ensure a clear division of responsibilities and prevent potential conflicts of interest, which to our knowledge we haven't had any. Athletic directors employed by the Roanoke County Public Schools are prohibited from serving as a coach for any athletic team within the division. So that's the draft policy, and I guess I'll leave it to you guys to discuss whether you would like to move forward or.
And we have run the language by legal counsel
Yeah.
and passed muster, so no issues on that front.
Ran it by.
I appreciate taking the time to do it and investigate it. I don't think it's a terrible idea to be proactive instead of reactive. I think that's something that we all hold true to when we can. And I like the idea of putting this in place.
Anybody have questions?
I mean, we all know good coaches are hard to find, and the situation that I think that we had recently at one of the schools. I mean, that coach may have been an athletic director as well, didn't forget how to coach in that time period. And it's a situation where if that person is the best for the job, we know we're having a hard time over at William Byrd finding a lacrosse coach. We have a hard time finding good coaches. Coaches are leaving because they don't get paid enough to coach 47 weeks a year or whatever it is that the VHSL now allows, 48 weeks a year. I'm not convinced that we're just having a very difficult time finding good coaches. And if that's the best person for the job, and they happen to be the athletic director, we can't discriminate against certain sports. And I know that football probably is one that it's difficult to be a football coach and an athletic director. Not impossible, but if it were the tennis coach or the golf coach, not to diminish those positions, but their responsibilities aren't 48 weeks a year like they are with that. I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of changing a policy.
I just have a question about the verbiage. Are we saying any coaching position or just head coach position, or they cannot coach at all?
So the verbiage would be any coaching
Okay.
position. I mean, that's just what we are putting forward. You guys could easily amend
right, I
that to
just
say
wondered.
head coaching or whatever.
I mean, there's always that conflict of interest. You know, you're always going to get blamed that you're putting more time into football versus baseball versus tennis. I mean, you're always going to get those complaints, and a lot of the sports take a lot of time, like you said, with football or any of them anymore. So,
Well, and there's also can be a conflict of interest in terms of use of facilities, right? Being able to use the gym, use the field. I mean, that could be a potential conflict of interest as well.
well, and then if there's complaints, I mean, where does that
Who are they
complaint-
complaining to?
It can't go to the athletic director. It's going to have to go.
They're
you
wearing
know,
the same hat.
right.
For
It's
me,
gonna-
that's probably the biggest
the
thing
hat.
is
Because
that
if you're right,
there's
no
you know,
person to go
puts
to beyond.
the administrator back in another
Right.
position of having to deal with it.
And then to defer to somebody else to help make that decision and their friends, or it just gets complicated.
Yeah, that's
Well, in talking to other divisions, my understanding is that this is common practice, and this is, might not be in policy, but it is in practice. It's
Well,
best practice that everybody
I
practices.
think we adhered to this before. I don't know if there was a policy. I guess it wasn't, but it just seemed like
There wasn't, yeah.
that was something we did. And I guess I see the you know, first off, if we're going to have ADs, you know, there wasn't too many years ago we didn't have ADs, and the coaches did their own scheduling or whatever, which obviously probably made them happier because they could work out their own schedules. But I just think if we're going to have ADs, there probably needs to be a separation of duties in some fashion that, you know, you've got that before they get to the administrator, you know, to that level. I mean, do we really want we know what our principals go through with all of the special needs and the what are some of the, I can't remember all the acronyms that go along with the things they have to do with behavioral and different things. And so I think our administrators are stretched already, and just seems like to me if we're going to have the ADs, and I know this isn't going to be popular with my AD, and he does a really good job, but I just think he needs to be, you know, separated from coaching duties, one or the other. I mean, he can do it. It doesn't matter to me, and you know, I know it was a little bit difficult with your situation, and maybe it comes down to one of your schools that happens, but I see the need now to have some separation, I think.
Well, that brings up a good point you were talking about with the admin staff being overstretched. So I know when I was at Glenver, the AD would be the supervisor over some of the games in the evenings. You either had to have a principal, assistant principal, or an AD. So if he's coaching or he's practice, that's putting more responsibility on the staff
Is
because
that
somebody
typical?
has to be there.
Is that typical that an AD would be one of those people instead of an administrator?
Yes,
It could be.
so
Okay.
what usually happens is they sit down and they divide up during like the spring sports season. Okay, I'll cover this, and this.
So you're down a person if that person is coaching a sport.
Somebody else has to come in and
Would
fill
come in and have to.
They kind of have to job share a little bit.
So to me, I mean, that right there puts more stress upon your staff. I mean, AD job's not easy, like you mentioned.
No,
I mean,
no, it's not.
one of the biggest complaints that you're going to get sports related. I mean, it's just the way it is.
It's just, I think
So-
it comes down to best practice.
I
And
think
it's not
so.
best practice. That's what we're striving for.
I would agree that it's probably good practice, but I don't know that we need to change the policy.
Well, because it's happened in the past, you probably need a policy if you haven't been using best practice. Because then you say, well, we've done it before. Precedent has been set. So,
Yeah, it would be hard to enforce that.
yeah.
Well, as boards come and go, it's like the policy, you gotta play all the Roanoke County teams. How does that work
Well,
out
and it
when they
keeps the,
stop?
it keeps the principal from having to make that decision,
Yeah,
and it puts the principal in a bad spot. I mean, if you're, well, I would love to give it to you. I think you're well qualified for it. However, you're the AD, and that's going to create me problems. I mean, how else are you going to word that? I mean,
Well, I support the policy and I like to see it adopted. And I don't care when we do it, but that's my 2 cents.
And
I would agree.
so it is that it's effective once we do this, but there are people that are already in those situations, right? So there are people who are serving right now as a coach and an AD. So
I
does
think
that
you'd have
mean what?
maybe next year.
Be for
start.
this season, for the next 2025 season?
Yeah, no one, I mean, when coaching contracts work, it's by, on an annual basis, and the coach's contract actually don't go into effect, they're not actually assigned until right before the season starts.
Okay.
I mean, having said that, if you're talking about, like, for example, a spring sport, it is January, so that's not a lot of notice.
Right. That would be
And
difficult.
somebody have to find a coach, in that situation.
I think you have to
You might
wait.
take that into consideration.
Okay.
It's just popped up on our agenda when, yesterday? I mean, we really haven't had time to explore it, in my opinion. I wouldn't mind seeing maybe a little more, our ability to explore it a little bit further before we go and make a decision.
I don't need any more exploring, do you?
No, I'm good.
Do you need any more exploring? You could always vote no to it, David.
So in
And I
that case, it
probably
becomes an
will.
action item and not consent.
Yeah, if you wanted to.
Never all gonna agree,
If you wanted to consider it for the next meeting, usually for consent agenda items.
Everyone has to.
In fact, consent is often referred to as unanimous consent. So when you have, unanimous opinion about something, it's okay if everybody agrees, put it on consent. Otherwise, it'd be best practice to put it on action, so you actually take a vote, and that way if you have dissent, that can be expressed.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then sometimes if stuff does get thrown into the consent agenda,
Right.
you can make an amendment and pull it out.
Oh, yeah,
And
you
to
can
vote on
always
it
put-
too,
you
because
can move
that
it.
does happen, but we've been lucky that hasn't happened here.
Yeah, just put it on as an action
As an
item.
action
Just
item.
action works for me.
Okay. So, I have heard in your discussion some thoughts about if you implemented it, it wouldn't go into effect until,
The new year, new
Well,
school.
Well, I mean, I
next
just
school
think
year.
you're not giving anybody, I mean, like you said, open gyms are starting next week for these sports. So I don't think you're not helping anyone, I don't think, by
I think you're right.
that.
New school.
We know
year.
we know how that works when you do
Gives
that in
time.
the beginning of the season.
just wondering, so.
Like prior to fall, like, is that what we?
Well, yeah, I'm just wondering, like, if we actually put it on and you voted on it next meeting, if it's not going to go into effect until next school year, you probably don't want to word that in policy that way because, well, you could, your motion at the meeting
Yeah.
could be, effective July 1st, even though the policy,
That's fine.
maybe that way it's in the minutes that it doesn't go into effect till July 1st.
has
You
any
can do it that
sports
way.
contracts came out yet?
Not for spring sports.
No. When would that typically come out?
Pretty soon, right?
So when I talk
Right.
to HR, it's a couple weeks before the season starts. Just when they get them, they try to get them out faster, but they,
I would really hate
So
to affect
technically, I mean, he's
spring
saying that
this
we could
quick,
do it
though.
now, but then you really are leaving some of these teams with.
I would rather wait till the start of only because I think, I know at least one situation, I would hate to say, well, you can't do it this spring. I mean,
And you're
I would
already-
think we'd at least wait till the new school year, if that's okay. That's what I would say.
When do the other policy changes take effect? Is that start of the school year typically?
Well, I mean, of course,
At
you
any
guys look at policies as they come up, but in terms of the big batches of policy reviews and so
Right.
forth, they usually come up in two batches. So one is, usually early spring and then one in June. So, I mean, to answer your question.
Well, and it wouldn't give anybody, like Mr. Greenway saying, it's not putting anybody in a spot here where the next week or two, they're not, all of a sudden
They don't
they
have a
get
coach.
told.
Yeah,
So
it's too much.
they
yeah.
would have the opportunity to coach the rest of this season coming up, and then fall, it would take effect.
Yeah, Yeah, my recommendation would be if you wanted to go ahead and, take action on it at next meeting, you just word the motion in that form, I move that this policy be adopted and go into effect, July 1st, 2025, and I think that'll take care of that concern.
Okay, that's a great suggestion.
I mean, I think to Mr. Linden's point, it is hard to get coaches, we know this. But I still think that, we've touched on several conflicts of interest. And we're basically asking someone to choose to coach or be the AD, so.
All right. We'll put it on action for next meeting.
Item 4.04, request to accept unbudgeted grants, Mrs. Susan Peterson.
Oh, that's pretty.
Fitting for the week.
Fitting for where we're at right
Yeah.
now.
They may be as cold as we are.
Actually, we need a beach scene, Susan, on there.
Warm thoughts, right?
Warm thoughts.
All right. Nope. Don't have it. Hold on. Let me just do this. I apologize. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the board. Real quick, I wanted to go over some budgeted grants that we have received this year. And just to run through the process, during the budgeting process, so for the fiscal year 24-25 budget, we do budget certain grants that are recurring. When those are budgeted, we don't necessarily bring the increases and decreases because we bring a budget amount, and then later in the year, the final award is given, and we know how much in total it is. And so as part of the budgeting process, we do create a special projects account to hold kind of budget to keep our total ordinance at a level amount. For example, in the grant fund, we put $650,000 in the special projects for any changes in the grants or for unspent or unbudgeted grants that come during the year. When we do have unbudgeted grants, we bring those to you for approval. We would appropriate any funds from the special projects account first, and if we don't have enough money, then we would end up having to take an ordinance request to the Board of Supervisors. So the ones that are before you now do not rise to that level. They can all be covered by the special projects. We have two funds that we have grants coming into. The first is the grant fund. We have $900 from the VDOE that provided stipends to 9 teachers who did become trainers and supported the implementation of the 2023 mathematics standards of learning and English standards of learning using the high quality materials. We had another one for STEM plus C competitive grants. So these are $5,000 each. The first is for Herman L. Horn First Lego League Club, and the other for the Green Valley Elementary Robot Drone League Challenge. So these are continuing grants. And then the VDOE, there's a micro grant that we applied and received funds for. This is removing barriers related to academic achievement, and it will support educating our families. And that was $10,000. And then the final was a Claude Moore Opportunities. They had a year-end grant opportunity where they were trying to lend out some additional monies. We will use this, and they approved this to purchase transparent head phantoms, transparent pelvis phantoms, transparent knee phantoms, dementia simulation, and some overbed tables. So this is a wonderful way to get some additional equipment for students to use during their classes. So the total of the grant fund special projects is $40,460, and we have enough in the special projects to cover those grants. The other fund that has some new money is the minor capital fund. And if you recall, last month, Mr. Terry brought to you a request for the 2024-2025 security grant, in which Glenver Elementary School received some funds. So whenever VDOE has these grants, whatever's unspent, they go back and they reallocate. We got a little bit of money from the reallocation that will go towards Glenver High School camera surveillance equipment. It's not a lot, so we'll buy as many cameras as we can with that. So we'll get $13,407 for that. There is a 25% match on these security grants, and Mr. Terry can cover that in his general fund budget. So out of the minor capital fund, we would just use the grant special projects amount of $13,407. This is not to be confused with your minor capital account that you use for projects. This is a grant amount set aside. So I can answer any questions on any of these, or we would like for this to roll to consent for the next meeting to be approved so that we can appropriate them.
I'm good with that.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Dr. Nicely, did you want to address the snow?
Yes, thank you. So, as you all know, this has been a rough start to our second semester. As far as the weather goes, it's been an extended break, for our students. And I was joking and said it's several times when I visit classrooms and schools, kids will invariably ask, hey, are we going to get any snow days this year? And of course, my answer is always, well, of course, as long as it actually snows. And of course, the last 2 years, it's been quite the drought on that front. But when it rains, it pours, of course, and ice is just probably one of the worst situations we can find ourselves in. And as you all also know, the geography of our county is such that you can be, perfectly, in good shape in my neighborhood. My streets are actually pretty good over in the Bonsack area. Most of, actually all of North County at this point we're good with. The entire east part, the whole Benton area we're good with. Glenver area we're good with. You often think of our mountainous areas like Catawba, and sometimes those areas can be a little dicey, but we're actually in good shape there. Southwest County is just the pesky area in terms of just how the weather systems hit, and because of just how our houses and streets are built over there. There's so many shaded areas and a lot of the back roads. If you ever, in fact, Dr. Schultz, I took a little trip over on Mount Chestnut Road yesterday. That was a thrill, wasn't it?
Yeah.
We almost got right off the road by.
I was using my imaginary brake.
Right.
Today I was on Sugarloaf and the garbage truck was coming and hit the corner, and there was another truck coming on. I was thinking to that truck, you better yield to that garbage
And
truck.
there's just nothing you can do. And some of these streets are just, straight downhill, and I just can't imagine a bus down the road. And we just don't want to risk, our students. I know that's frustrating for a lot of our families, especially if you're in the parts of the county where you're like, okay, what's the problem? But for today, really what we're kind of left with is most of the Back Creek attendance zone up to 21 was still in really rough shape. That's a lot of where we drove around up in the whole Canterbury Park neighborhood, which is Cave Spring Elementary, off Roselawn up that way, was still in really bad shape. I actually called Mr. Kaywood, who used to work for VDOT today, hoping he might have some information from VDOT. They were actually very helpful. He got a hold of somebody at VDOT, and we gave him some street names. They were going to take some, what do they call it, motor graders up there to try to break up some ice, put some different chemicals down. So hopefully that might pay off. We're not quite there for tomorrow, but just like, if we have a situation at an individual school where, the heat's out one day or we don't have any power to school and so forth, sometimes we have to close an individual school. I think it just makes sense for tomorrow to look at probably not be able to go at probably one of our elementary schools. That whole the Back Creek area I think is still in pretty rough shape in terms of most of those roads, which also of course affects the middle school and high school kids on those routes, which would be excused. And then we have some selected streets. I applaud our transportation staff. I know they've been driving roads all day. They've been compiling street names for us. We've been looking at bus routes in terms of exactly which buses would be affected. And this is not unprecedented. There are sometimes streets where a bus can't go down, and so we, if a bus, can't safely do it, that they're, going to call those families and let them know that, hey, we can't get to you and so forth. So we just ask for patience with our families in the situations, but for tomorrow, I do believe we're going to probably be likely on a 2-hour delay schedule that allows visibility of our roads where there's still some ice, but probably in those areas that I mentioned, we're going to either have to not run routes in that area, probably close Back Creek again for tomorrow. But the other schools, I think we can operate safely with some selected streets and just kind of do it on that basis. So unless you as a board have a collective objection to that approach, I think that makes the most sense for us at this point. Just want to give you that update.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have anything else? Okay, meeting adjourned.